What it do, family? Appreciate everybody. Let's go and tap in. Tap in when you do. Share the live, and let's build on this knowledge. Like I said, this not gonna be too long with the live that's containing the ancient Mayan. We're reading these lives not gonna be too long. I'm just coming on here just to continue on the book so we can build on that, right? But if you got one, roll that bitch up and put it in the yeah. Yeah, but we about to get it going. I'm not even gonna wait too long because I know y'all can rewind this back. Uh, there you go. Okay. All right, bet. So we gonna start on this page right here. Now this kind of where we left off at. Now when you see, when you see what we're talking about, you're gonna see how the ancient Mayan the ancient Mayans basically came up here, traveled up here, and you can tell by not only the names and everything of certain places, but actual the artifacts that's found. Right. So we gonna start off on where it say the third. The third Tennessee Gorget reproduced here from Mr. Holmes' work exhibits a combination of numerals, which is particularly interesting if confronted with the sacred numbers of the Mexicans and Mayas. Remember, we talked about the sacred numbers that I mentioned in the previous lives, but we gonna mention a little bit more here, right? And it all goes back to astronomy. From a central circle, three curved lines issue in a fashion resembling those on figure 21, number 2. But the fact that the circular band exhibits 7 double circles and the outer edge is divided into 13 parts is of special moment. 13, remember that. Still, another design on a shell gorget from Tennessee not only exhibits the peculiarity pointed out by Mr. Holmes of a square with loops resembling certain figures in Mexican codices, but also significant details which I shall point out. What it do, family? Thanks for everybody tapping in. Share the live. Let's build on this ancient Mayan knowledge. We only gonna touch on like 10 pages this live right here. But the women, the sisters, y'all gonna love this. This gonna get into how powerful y'all were, right, or are. The cross in the center occupies the center of a star with 8 rays, and the 4 bird heads at the sides of the square illustrate rotation right to left. I am inclined to view in this gorget an emblem of Polaris with Cassiopeia in rotation around it, figured as a bird. Remember me telling you, the birds as above, so below, and all of that, right? But whether this is the case or not, it must be conceded that it is indeed remarkable to find a set of symbols consisting of the spider, the cross, the serpent, and the bird carved in prehistoric gorgets found in the United States, whilst the deep meaning of these identical symbols is furnished by Maya and Mexican records, right? I venture to remark here that no more expressive or appropriate ornament than these shell gorgets could have been designed or worn by ancient Maya or Mexican priests, prophets, and leaders who in a remote past has guided themselves by light of Polaris and instituted its code as the basis of their native religion. Let me change this page for y'all. This is about ancient Mexican knowledge, man. So I got a couple other parts that's already went live on. This is the 4th edition, and we just reading this book, and it's gonna give us a lot of insights on the ancient Mayans, and not only that, how it connects with our civilizations today in North America too, right? All right, but let me change this for y'all right quick. Hold on. Boom. All right, so y'all can follow along. On realizing the above mentioned identity of symbolism, it is not impossible not to conclude that the prehistoric race which inhabited certain parts of the United States was under the dominion of the same ideas as were Mexicans and Mayans. The indications point, in fact, to probability that the origin of the employment of the spider symbol originated in Yucatan, and if this be omitted, then there is no reason to deny the possibility that the serpent symbol came from there also, since the Maya language suggests affinity between the serpent, Kan, and the sky equals Ka'an, and the numeral 4 equals Kan. I refrain for the present from expressing any final conclusion on the subject, which will doubtless afford ample food for reflection and argument to all interested in the important problem as to where the cradle of ancient American civilization was situated. But these symbolic gorgets go far towards sustaining Professor Putnam's oft expressed conclusions that the ancient peoples of central and southern portions of the United States were to a certain extent offshoot of the ancient Mexicans. Not all, right? So I don't like when people say that. So it's original peoples all over the Americas, bro. So, but it is like my people, my ancient ancestors are the Mayans. We traveled to the southeast, right? We wasn't originally here, right? And it's all type of evidence to prove this, not only from names, linguistics, and artifacts, but it's other shit, man, that we can prove, right? So it's people that was already here, and they ain't no ancient Mexicans. The ancient Mexicans got they shit from the ancient Mayans, right? And the ancient so-called Mexicans are not like later on they off breeds. They was usurped and by Europeans and Asians and shit. So they ain't really us. You feel me? They got a lot of their information now. The original ones are, but then they got usurped and shit. You feel me? But we gonna touch on that later, right? It's gonna be on another session. Now, before abandoning the subject of native symbolism and star emblems, I shall like to present as a curiosity with an appeal to specialists to enlighten me as the astronomical knowledge of the Eskimos, an Eskimo drawing from Professor Wilson's instructive and useful monograph. It is said to represent a flock of birds, but so closely resembles Cassiopeia and Polaris that I am tempted to view it as an indication that the Eskimos may also have associated the idea of a celestial bird or birds wheeling around a central point with the constellation and the pole star. She don't know, she just guessing. She just putting some shit in there. It's not a fact what she's saying right now. You feel me? We just going over what she's saying because it is a lot of gems on it, gems in this book. But like I said, with anything you read, you use your own discernment and use the knowledge that you acquired beforehand to, interpret what you're reading now, right? And you read what's on the fucking page, but at the same time, it don't mean every author is right, right? Just put that out there. Having one ventured so far ahead, I cannot refrain from presenting here an interesting set of Aboriginal star symbols reproduced from Professor Wilson's comprehensive work. Figure 24, each composed of a circle combined with a single exception with a circle. All right. I draw attention to the striking resemblance of some of these signs to those painted on finely decorated pottery found on the Hasadilla of Don Jose Luna in Nicaragua and described by J.F. Bransford, M.D., Archaeological Researches in Nicaragua, Smithsonian Institute, 1881, page 30b. And that suggests, hold on, let me change this for y'all. Boom. Now y'all can see what it says at the bottom for this. Now, a couple of these were found in Missouri, a couple was found in Arkansas, a couple was found in Kentucky, the National Museum, and it all kind of relates back to ancient Mayan symbolism, right? So y'all can, look at that for a little minute while I change the page. All right, go back from the last sentence. All right, and that suggests that in both localities, the symbol may be a rudimentary swastika and represents Polaris, a circumpolar rotation. Right now y'all can peep this. So you see how one is, you see how two is. So it's basically showing you the symbol, what the symbolism is, and it all a lot of times tends to go back to astronomy, right? The constellations or the sun, the moon, whatever. Let's go to the next page. In conclusion, I refer the reader to Mr. C.C. Willenbaugh's valuable and most interesting analysis of the decorations upon the pottery from Mississippi Valley. Let me go back to that last one because I ain't tell y'all shit got Mississippi yet. Some of these from Mississippi, most of them, like you can see at the bottom where they from, right? It'll tell you where they from. But the majority of these bitches from Mississippi though. So, that's a gem. I'm talking about the Mississippian civilization, right? Where we was at. All right, in conclusion, I'll refer to the reader, Mr. C.C. Willenbaugh's variable and most interesting analysis of the decorations upon pottery from the Mississippi Valley, in which he figures the remarkable specimens preserved in the Peabody Museum, Cambridge, the designs on which, as he states, are mostly of symbolic origin and have been in use among various tribes within the prehistoric period from the Great Lakes to Mexico, right? The Great Lakes is what? Michigan and all that shit, right? With the kind of permission of the editor of the journal, I reproduce here some of Mr. Willenbaugh's illustrations on plate 3, returning to consider the probable result of the gradual diffusion of star coat owing to natural causes and a consequent divergence from the idea of the center, which has so deeply influenced the minds of primitive men during many centuries, with earnest and extended astronomical observation, keeping pace with the development of the idea of the above and below. It is obvious that the utmost attention will be given next to the conspicuous star groups and planets which are visible at certain times and then seem to have departed or descended into the underworld. Anyone who has read the interesting communications by Herr Richard Andre on the relation of the Pleiades to the beginning of the year amongst primitive people, followed by a note by Herr Karl von D. Stein, I don't know how to pronounce his name, on the same subject, will realize that widely separated tribes of men, by dint of simple observation, knew the exact length of the periodical appearance and disappearance of this star group and regulated their year accordingly, right? So it's saying that they paid attention even to the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters. If y'all know, that's how the mounds was built. A lot of these from these constellations dealing with astronomy. That's where the mounds, temples, and all of this shit was built. It was built under it to not only observe it, but for a lot of other things, for agriculture, to know when to crop, blah, 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 right? But the Pleiades is very important. It's just like they just said, some knew it for an exact length of a year, right? Just like the calendar swastika was made to represent a length of a year. That's what the swastika originally represented, right? We were the first people to use the swastika, and it represented a year, a cycle of time. That's it. And it came from astronomy. Then we put our own meanings and, shit to it. But yeah, where we at with it? So yeah, then time, the periodical appearance, disappearance of this star group and regulated their year accordingly. Andrew cites that, for instance, that in Society Islands, the year was divided into two portions, the first of which was Matari Ina, the Pleiades above. It began and lasted during a time when these constellations were visible close to the horizon after sunset. The second period, named Madari Rero. The Pleiades below began, and that equals the Pleiades below, began and lasted for the time during which the star group was invisible after sunset. That ancient Mexicans had likewise observed the Pleiades and been deeply impressed by them is proven by the well-known fact that the ceremony of kindling of the sacred fire, which betoken, oh shit, I didn't even follow along. Let me change this. My bad, y'all. Shit. All right, yeah, this will be it. All right. I'm gonna jump back up to that the ancient Mexicans had likewise observed the Pleiades and been deeply impressed by them is proven by the well-known fact that the ceremony of the kindling of the sacred fire, which betokened the commencement of a new cycle, was performed. When the Pleiades attained the zenith at midnight precisely. In my complete monograph in the ancient Mexican calendar system, it will be my endeavor to present all the data I have collected and concerning the degree of elementary astronomical knowledge attained by native astronomers. I shall therefore content myself with pointing out here that besides the foregoing testimony about the Pleiades, the native name for which is Mayek or Mayek, equals the many, or the Dayan quiz this Dayan quiz this Dayan quiz this. All right, I'm trying to pronounce the shit right for y'all. Diane. So while I'm reading, I ain't gonna hold y'all. So I'm currently learning the Yucatec Mayan language. Like besides this shit, I'm taking my time to actually learn the language, going and actually studying the language, the basics, the roots. How do you say certain words? Like it's certain words that I even said in the past, reading this book that I pronounced it wrong. Now me knowing the correct way to pronounce it or the different sounds that even existed in these different languages, and all of this shit connects with each other, right? So say for instance the Q U is no Ku in the Nahuatl language, right? It's Q, it's KW, but you see a U right there, right? So that's something for instance, right? Or the TL is a one sound, so it makes a like a sound, like a it's kind of weird, but it's dope at the same time. But let me continue. Diane Quiztil, the marketplace. There are records proving the cult of the planet Venus was a firmly established feature of the native religion at the time of the conquest. Salgon records of the Nahuatl names for this planet was Sitalpul or Sitalpuel, Sitalpuel or Huey Sitlalin, both signifying the great star. So that Sitlalpul or Huey Sitlalan is both signifying the great star. In the great temple of Mexico, an edifice named and then see that hue is not, it's a W. So when you see HU together, that's actually the sound for W, right? So L-Y got Katlin. I can't, it's broke off. I'll be able to say it better if it wasn't broke off and shit. But when you see that in that name where it says name that's what. So that's not a HU or HU sounds. I'm just giving y'all a couple gems. So when you're reading this on your own, or if you go decide to do your own research on the ancient Mayans or the ancient Mexicans, and you're reading in their language, I'm just giving you a couple gems, right? Literally, the land of Scott consisted of a great high column on which the morning star was painted. Captives were sacrificed in front of this column annually at the period when the star reappeared. That's crazy. With the regard to the connection of the Pleiades with the beginning of the Mexican cycle, it is interesting to note her Andrews' statements that the most intimate connection of the star group with the thoughts of primitive people would naturally take place in such localities where the periodical movements coincided with the change of season, wind, and weather, which affected agriculture. That's all I say. This shit, astronomy and agriculture at its root, the masculine and the feminine, right? Duality, balance, harmony. Everything connects. A survey of the data presented by her Andrews shows that the cult of the Pleiades attained the greatest development amongst the tribes inhabiting a southerly latitude. It was in South America, indeed, that the Peruvians, alongside of their highly developed sun cult, rendered homage and offered sacrifices to the Pleiades. In Mexico, the cult of the Pleiades appeared as intimately associated with that of the sun and to have assumed importance in historical and comparatively recent times, probably when the periodicity of the sun's movements have been taught and recognized, and the sign Olin, which is an exact presentation of the annual course of the sun, had been invited and adopted as a symbol, right? Let me change this page for you guys. Where we at with it? I have already pointed out that this sign occurs on the calendar stone, for instance, when just got a phone call and shit. Wait. All right, where was that? All right, I have already pointed out that this sign occurs on the calendar stone, for instance, which has a human face in the center, bearing two numerals on the forehead and obviously symbolizing the union of two and one. Let me read that again. I have already pointed out that this sign occurs on the calendar stone, for instance, which has a human face in its center, bearing two numerals on its forehead and obviously symbolizing the union of two and one. In other instances, the center displays the eye or star symbol and conveys the suggestion that the four movements of the circumpolar constellations were thereby symbolized. It may be that in ancient Mexico, the two symbols respectively referring to their movements of the sun and of the circumpolar star groups were emblematic of the two different cults or religions which had existed alongside of each other. The first cult of the above, or the blue sky, was directed towards the sun and the planets and stars intimately associated with sunrise and sunset, among them the Pleiades. The cult of the below, or of the nocturnal heaven, was directed towards the moon, Polaris, and the circumpolar constellations. Also, the stars and planets during the period of their disappearance, and possibly in the same way to the damn, I'm fuck it up. Medical, my bad. Black Sun, the enigmatical Black Sun figure in BNMS, which have been the sun during the nightly stay in the house of the underworld, whose door was in the west. In order to obtain the idea of the immense proportions ultimately assumed by two diverging cults and enormous influence they exerted upon the entire native civilization, it would be necessary to examine the form of the social organization in Montezuma's time. In order to comprehend this, however, it is first necessary to study carefully the myths relating to its origin. Torquemada cites that the authority of Friar Andres de Almos for the following native account of the creation of men, which has differently recounted to him in each province. So he just said in each province, it was a little different. but you about to see it was still got remnants of the same. So he states that the majority of the natives, however, agreed that there was in heaven a god named Shining Star, or Sitlau Tona, and a goddess named She of the Starry Skirt, Sitlau Q, right? Who gave birth to a flint knife, Dekbat. You're right. Remember, the flint knife is I guess, the strike or the flame of life, right? And then the man, the above is Sitlau Tonak, right? And he was the heaven, right, or shining star. Then the woman is represented as Sitlau Q, which is she of the starry sky, right? Or the below, or the moon, or it's, you know what I mean, agriculture too. Whole lot of shit, right? There are other children startled at this cast the flint down from there are other children startled at this cast flint down from the sky. It fell to the earth at a place named Seven Caves and produced 1,600 gods and goddesses, a figure of speech which evidently expressed the idea that in coming in forcible contact with the soil, the flint gave force sparks innumerable, which conveyed vitality to numberless beings. It is evidently the same idea of life sparks being called into existence by the union of heaven and earth, which underlies the Texcocan version of the creation of man recorded as follows by Turkomada. Right? Now that's some fire. So, like I said, all of this goes back to astronomy and agriculture, right? Um, when you're reading this, you will be able to see that, right? At its root, all of this shit and duality, right? Balance, the masculine and the feminine coming together creates divinity, everything connecting, whether it's good or bad. Yeah, this shit get real deep. Let's go on to the next one. All right. Now, this is about to talk about the women a little bit more, sisters a little bit more, right? The sun shot an arrow towards the land of Alcoma near the boundary of Texcoco. This made a hole in the ground whence issued the first man. The illustrated version of the above myths given in the Vatican Codex designates the celestial progenitor of human life as Quetzalcoatl, also named Tonaka Tequitli, Tequitli, right? Tonaka Tequitli, that's the man, right? The Lord of our substance, right? And Shikoma Sho Chi Shiat. So it's Chi Koma Sho. So when you see the X and the O next to each other, the X is a sh, it's like she, XI she, right? So it's that sound, it's the sh sound, basically like a damn S, really, if you look at it. Shok. And matter of fact, in the Mayan language, just another gem. In the Mayan language, XOK, which is Shok, is the English. That's the English. That's where the English got, which is Shok is Mayan for fish, right? And the English took that and made the word shark. So that's a little gem. But Shok, Chikome, Shok, Che equals seven roses or flowers, and sit loud Tonala equals the Milky Way, literally the shining stars. The dual divinity is figured as two persons with the shaft of an arrow over each of their heads with the symbol of Tatpat, right, which is the flint, between them as the issue of their union, right? You remember me telling you As above, so below, the masculine man, I mean the masculine and the feminine equals divinity, right? When you come together, that makes one, that makes harmony, right? That's the root of all of this, right? Um, Dualities, connections, a whole lot more shit between them as the issue of their union. In the Borgian Codex, the a barbed arrow point instead of the tekbot figures between the two between figures between the celestial parents. Their union is a symbolized by covering the shape, which in the further representations, figure 25, number 3 and 5 is in the same MS, offers resemblance to the da or the ta shape windows, which are a common feature in Maya, also in Pueblo architecture. The ta is that T sign that you see right there. So in that symbolism, that's the thought. I'm pronouncing that shit wrong right now, but y'all get the drift. The preceding data, which could be amplified, seem to show that the native associations that the ta or ta shape not merely with the idea of the male and female principles, but also the above and below, or heaven, air and water, and earth, which is earth and fire. I shall have occasion further on to refer again to the symbolism of the native thought. The above illustrations, however, definitely prove that the flint knife and the arrow with the flint point, presumably, were indiscriminately designed as the medium by means of which the spark of life was created and imparted to earthborn beings. It will be proved further that at the period of the conquest, the arrow was revered as an image of life producing force in Yucatan and Mexico. The flint knife cased in wrappings was called the son of Siwak Coat, Siwak, the Earth Mother. Siwak is the Earth Mother and regarded her as a special symbol, right? Hold on. Go to the next page for you so you can follow along. All right. Now we was at Siwak, special symbol. It is significant, therefore, to found that it was the emblem of office of one of two high priests who alone employed it as a sacrificial knife in performing his awful duty of immolating human victims. All right. The fact that the cane shaft of an arrow figures above the head of a celestial couple in the Vatican Codex is particularly interesting because the name Ome Akat, the two cane, is given as the name of a divinity by Sargon, and the ceremony of kindling the new fire at the commencement of a cycle of years was associated with the calendar sign Ome Akat. At a certain festival, images of Oma Kat, there were manufactured, carried by the devout to their houses in order to receive from them blessings and multiplication of possessions. Let me read that part again. At a certain festivals of Ome Kat were manufactured and carried by the devout to their houses in order to receive from them blessings and multiplication of possessions. I draw attention to the fact that life is supposed to have proceeded from the union of stellar divinities, that the Tekpat and flint are the well-known symbols of the north and fire, and the Vatican commentator identifies the celestial parent as 7 flowers. What is more, Duran relates that the native race was organized into 7 separate tribes, and that these claims to have come out of 7 caves. Sikom Ostak. Sikom Aztak. I guess that, that sound like Aztec, right? Aztak, which were situated in Culhuacan, Culhuacan, yeah, Culhuacan or Aztlan, a land of which all men know that it is in the north. Now, Wakan is composed of the word Diot, which is designated the stars, the sun, the gods, and by extension, something divine or celestial. So Diot, that's how you say, where you say T-O-T-L, that's how you say sun and stars in Nuat. Now, Kiowa, or Ko. What example? Ko. All right, Kowatlo. Okay, Kowatlo. All right, meaning something bent over or recurved, or the action of describing a circle by moving around something. And Khan means the place of, and Wat. This locality is represented in the picture writings by a strange and impossible mountain with a recurved summit. Aztlan literally means the land of whiteness, brightness, light. In Duran's atlas, the 7Ks are represented as containing men and women, the progenitors of the 7 tribes. The order in which these are described, in which Mexican myths have an issue from the caves, is instructive and sheds light upon the provenance and purpose of the tradition. It represents Mexicans as the superior predestined race who remain in their cave the longest by divine command, their God having promised them this land. Sound like some cracker shit to me. I ain't gonna hold you. Sound crazy. I'm gonna read that part over. To me, that sound crazy. The order in which these are described, in which the Mexican myth as having issue from the caves, and instructive and sheds light upon the provenance and purpose of the tradition. It represents the Mexicans as the superior predestined race who remain in their cave the longest by divine command, quote unquote. You see that? Their God having promised them this land. The tradition relates to 6 tribes reached and settled down in the central plateau of Mexico 302 years before the Aztecs arrives under the leadership of Huitzilopochtli, an oracler divinity whose commandments were transmitted to the people by 4 priests. Let me change the page so y'all can follow along, right? This shit sound crazy. I ain't gonna hold you. Yeah, this the page right here. All right, so let me read this again. The tradition relates that the 6 tribes reached and settled down in the central plateau of Mexico 302 years before the Aztecs arrived, under the leadership of Huitzilopochtli, right? An ocular divinity whose commandments were transmitted to the people by 4 priests. In my opinion, it is impossible to study the above and supplementary data without realizing that the native race assigned to its origin a dual star divinity associated with Tekbat, the symbol for the north and for fire. The peculiarity that the divinity is designated as 7 flowers and that there were 7 caves indicates that the native idea was that each tribe came out of one of the 7 stars in Ursa Major or Minor. The Aztecs seem to have claimed for themselves the descent from the superior star, the central one, and to have thus justified or supported their ultimate establishment of a central government which ruled over the other 6 tribes. It's crazy, girl. The assumption that the native race claimed descent from Ursa Major or Minor constellation is further supported by the fact that the shape of the mythical recurved mountain and the name of Aztlan equals land of light or brightness are simultaneously explained as well as the number of caves and tribes. It does not seem to be a mere coincidence that in two totally different codices, a sacred dance is represented as executed by seven individuals who move around a central seated personage. In latter in Mess, the seated figure wears a headdress surmounted by flint knives, and his face is painted red, the color assigned to the north. Now that's the below. The north, remember, that's associated with Michelin Tech or Tech with Tequatili, Tequatili and Tezcatlipoca. That's associated with them, and the below, which is agriculture, the women, the divine feminine, right? Energy, and the above is represented by the man or the masculine, right? Among other things. Moreover, Moreover, the dance is taking place before an image of Mictlan Tequih, Tequih, the Lord of the North, whose raiment is strewn with cross symbols. Referring to other native dances, we find that the most sacred of all dances was performed at the festival of the god of fire by priests only, who smeared with black paint to typify darkness and night, carried two torches in each other hand, and first sat, then slowly moved around in a circle around the divine brazier, and finally cast their torches into it. All right, let me change this so y'all can follow along. All right, bet that up. So that was just telling you a kind of like a let me read that part over again. Hold on. All right, yeah. So referring to other native dances, we find that the most sacred of all dances were performed at the festival of the god of fire, which is represented by the woman, by priests only, who smeared with black paint to typify darkness and night, carried two torches in each hand, and first sat, then slowly moved in a circle around the divine brazier, and finally cast their torches into it. This probably the most ancient of sacred dances must have been extremely impressive and significant to those who witnessed it. At the time from at nighttime from the base of the pyramid, and heard the distance of solemn chant of the dancers. All right. And they're showing that these pyramids was already built and why they was built. All right. All right. Where was that? To watchers from afar, the fire and the lighted torches revolving around must have seemed like a great central star with other stars ruling about it. Further on, it will be shown that the earliest form under which the deity was revered was that of a fire, and the foregoing description fully explains why it was first chosen as the most fitting image of the central immovable star. It has already been shown that in the popular game of the Flyers, a high pole surmounted by one man served as the pivot for the volation of the four performers who acted the flight of time. The idea of an extended rule proceeding from a central dual force was, however, carried out on a grand scale in the most solemn of all public dances, named Mito 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 Til till till is mito till is tilly till. All right, I'm gonna practice on that. States that as many as 8,600 persons dance in a wheel in a courtyard of the great temple, which had four doorways facing the cardinal point and opening out the four principal high roads leading to the capital. The doorways were respectively named after four principal gods and were spoken of as the doorway of such and such God and such a God. Clavigero to those to whose work Historio, you see that, I refer to the reader for further details. Describes the dances at the time of the conquest as having been most beautiful and relates that the natives were exercising these from their childhood by the priests. This authority also relates that the Mytholo Tistili was performed by hundreds of dancers at certain solemn festivals in a great central square of the city or in a courtyard of the temple, and gives the following description. The center of the space was occupied by two individuals designated elsewhere as high priests who beat measure on sacred drums. Now, remember they told you that fucking drums come from Africa. This is what they're gonna tell you. But never mind you, right? That one of the Mayans' oldest gods, name is Votan, right? And Votan was damn, I don't even think I got Cuz picture in my phone right now, but I done put in my content before, right? But Votan is one of the oldest god. He was known as the old black god, right? But not only that, he was known as the god of war and the god of drums, right? So when they tell you that uh, Africans created drums, that's some cap shit. That's bullshit. They literally had a god of drums that's supposed to be, if you kind of equate them to other mythologies, supposed to be the equivalent of what's cuz name? Photon. Not what's that nigga name, man? It's the he's supposed to be the equivalent of what's a little superhero movie? Thor father. Who was Thor father? I forgot his name. Odin. Odin. So Odin is supposed to be the equivalent of Votan in kind of like, I guess, Mayan spirituality or quote unquote mythology, which it all comes from astronomy. But let's continue. The center of this space was occupied by two individuals designated elsewhere as high priests who beat measure on sacred drums of two kinds. One, the large hue Hugh 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 That's the name of the large drum, emitted an extremely loud, deep tone which could be heard for miles, and was usually employed in the temples as a means of summoning the worship, etc. The second is the Tetpans, the still this Tepan Tepan Tepona Nasli Tepanasli Tepanasli. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Was a small portable wooden drum which was usually worn suspended from the neck by the leader in warfare and emitted the shrill piercing note to be employed as a signal. The chieftains, each of which personified a god, surrounded the two musicians, forming several concentric circles close to each other. At a certain distance from the outer one of these, the person of an inferior class were placed in circles, and these were separated by another interval of space from the outermost circles composed by young men and boys. The illustration given by Clavigero records that the order and disposition of the sacred dance, which represented a kind of will, the center of which was occupied by instruments and their players. The spokes of the wheels were as many as there were chieftains in the innermost circle. All moved in a circle while dancing and strictly adhered to their respective positions. Those who were nearest the center, the chieftains and elders, moved slowly with gravity, having a smaller circle to perform. The dancers performing the outer circles were, however, forced to move in extreme rapidity, so to preserve the straight line radiating from the center and headed by the chieftains. Right. So when you see a lot of these practice or even regalias and different things called, you can ask these natives, quote unquote natives, right? Native Americans and whatever, right? They don't know the meaning of this shit. They don't know that this shit goes back to astronomy. Like they literally don't know this shit, cuz they don't know, they call it a war bonnet, right? They call different shit like it shit didn't mean it meant different things, and a lot of it went back to sacred meanings and dealing with astronomy, right? But they have dances, whole ceremonies, kind of informing or performing the constellations as they saw it, right? Implementing what they saw in the sky here on Earth, right? All right, but let's continue. The perfect harmony of the dance, which successful sets of dancers kept going for 8 or more hours, were only distributed occasionally by certain individuals who pushed their way through the lines of dancers and amused these by indulging in all sorts of buffoonery, right? Buffoonery. But that's crazy. They say they was dancing for 8 hours and trying to keep that same type of dance going. Oh, yeah, you tripping. Yeah, that's long. No, but it all meant something. It all had deeper meanings, right? Even the length of time that they performed the ceremonies, right? No one on the reading the above description of the most ancient and sacred of native dances can fail to recognize that it was an actual representation of axial rotation, and that no more effective method of rendering the apparent differences in the degrees of velocity in the movements of the circumpolar and equatorial stars could have possibly have been devised. Right? The fact that this dance was a most solemn and sacred rite whose performance was obligatory to the entire population indicates that it was constituted an act of general obedience and homage, and a public acknowledgement of the absolute dominion of a central dual ruling power. It was particularly interesting that in this dance, the latter is represented by two individuals who respectively employed the sacred drum of their priesthood, and that was used by war chieftains only. All right, let me hold on, y'all. Spark this shit up. Oh, I left my lighter in there. Oh, that's crazy. All right. I'm gonna read that part again. It is particularly interesting that in this dance, the latter represented by two individuals who respectively employed the sacred drum of the priesthood, and that was used by war chieftains only, the one instrument emitting a low and the other emitting a high tone. For the culture hero Tezendal's Votan, who with the aid of his followers taught that this trial was the civil laws of government and their religious ceremonies were entitled the master of the sacred drum. Let me change this for y'all. All right. I was just saying something about Votan. I didn't even know Cuz was coming up, or I forgot he was coming up, right? But as I was saying earlier, now not only Votan is considered the master of the sacred drum, or the god of drums, quote unquote, but he's supposed to be the oldest, and they also call him the Black God, right? So I ain't the God of War, but that's a that's a gem right there. Votan, the culture hero of the Tizendars, or the Zendars. Votan, who with the aid of his followers, taught his tribe the civil laws of government and the religious ceremonials was entitled the Master of the Sacred Drum, reverting to the organization of the native race into 7 tribes and the wandering of the 7th and principal division under the leadership of Wazilo Pochitili, according to Tetzozomak. Wazilo Pochitili was accompanied by a woman who was called his sister and was carried by 4 men. Now, Shorty right here, she gangster. Y'all about to read her story. She gangster. I ain't gonna hold you. She about to talk to them crazy. Where my lighter at? That shit in the other room. Damn. All right. Fuck it. I'm just read this with y'all. But yeah, Shorty is gangster. Then watch this. So it says, all right. So remember what we seen about Wazalopo Chitili, right? Now, earlier, what we read about him. Now, Wazalopo Chitili was accompanied by a woman who was called his sister and was carried by 4 men. She was a powerful sorceress, possessed the power of assuming the shape of an eagle, and damn, my bad. She was a powerful sorceress, possessed the power of assuming the shape of an eagle, had made herself greatly feared, and caused herself to be adored as a goddess. Indignant at her ignorance, the priest consoled a course which was adopted by Mexicans. The woman and her family were left behind at Ma- Malinaco. Malinaco. The woman and her family were left behind at Malinaco, where they settled and populated a town, whilst the other portion of the tribe, under the strictly masculine rule, advanced towards Tula, where they established themselves. This was the second division which had taken place amongst the Mexicans or Aztecs, and when they reached Tula, they found their number greatly diminished. The same incident is related with greater detail by Torquemada, from which we learn that a great animosity was felt against the woman. On one occasion, which I shall not pause to describe, two war chiefs minister. The talk she gave them in return is so remarkable that she deserves to be quoted in full, for it affords a deep insight into the native mode of expression, teaches us the titles of the woman, and shows that her position was undoubtedly one of powerful authority. Right? Now her name is, we about to see it, she about to talk. I am Qualititli. I ain't gonna do it right now. Qualititli, your sister and of your tribe. You know this, and yet you think that despite, oh wait, hold on, let me read because I want to say it. I am Qualis your sister and of your tribe. You know this, and yet you think that the dispute or difference you have with me is like an ordinary one, such as you might wage on any ordinary base woman who possesses little spirit of courage. If you indulge in this thought, you are deceiving yourselves, for I am valiant and manly. She said, I am valiant, right? And manly. And my titles will oblige you to acknowledge this. For besides the ordinary name of fucking up her name, by which you know me, I possess 4 titles by which I know myself. The first one is Siwakwat. Siwakwat, right? Kwat is the name for a serpent in the Nawat word, and Siwak is a woman, right? Siwa Kuat. That's how you say that. Siwa Kuat equals the woman serpent or twin. The second one is Q Q Q Q sit Sitwat. Q Sitwat equals the woman, the eagle woman. The third is Yao Siwat. Yeah, equals the woman warrior. So this is all her different names that she telling them. She's talking greasy to these priests who playing with her body, basically. All right. They beefing with her. They trying to, you know what I mean, talk down on Shorty like she ain't that. You feel me? And she telling them like, yo, you better chill out, nigga. Y'all forgot who I am. Let me tell you who I am. And this is what she's doing right here. The third is Yayo Siwat equals the woman warrior, and the fourth is shit. does does it man does it man Siwat. I think it's Tezit. I fucked it up. Siwat, the woman of the underworld, right? From the properties or qualities conveyed by these titles, you can appreciate who I am, what power I yield, and what harm I can do you. If you want to test the truth of this, here is my challenge. She was talking crazy. So what we gonna do on the next one? All right, because that was 10 pages. We got this shit done in an hour. More than likely, I'll be saying it, but I'm trying to definitely come back tomorrow. Took me 2 days to get back to y'all. Hopefully, I just get on tomorrow, and we gonna pick up where we left off on this sister, because she's talking greasy to him, right? But you're gonna see how powerful she was, right? Because we gotta understand that we live in a patriarchal society right now. So, a lot of motherfuckers don't respect our women, our sisters out here who's powerful too, right? Who's powerful in other ways that we ain't. You feel me? So, when we come together, that creates divinity. Ain't nobody can fault with us. That's the way I see it. But appreciate everybody that did come in, tapped in, even if you stayed for a second. If you like the thing, even if you're watching from the hallway right now, I appreciate you. Please subscribe to the channel if you ain't already. We're gonna come back on tomorrow. We're gonna pick up on this sister and let her talk her shit. You hear me? Yeah, and we're gonna get to this knowledge. Because as you can see, I'm reading all of this shit is for a reason. All of this comes back, like I said, to astronomy and agriculture, the above and the below, the masculine and the feminine in harmony creates divinity, i.e., Quetzalcoatl, right? Yeah, Quetzalcoatl, and then you got Kukulkan. That's what they represent. You know what I mean? Everything is connected. But like I said, we're gonna pick up tomorrow on another 10 pages. I'm probably about to go to TikTok. Catch me over there. Appreciate you.